Well, we're only a little late, but that happens. We're gathered to celebrate a pretty stellar life and a really important presence in the history up to the present of this congregation, Martha Alfie. So we're going to be doing music. We're going to be hearing from her students, her disciples, her heirs of music, and her family, of course. And all of this for loving her. We'll begin with a prelude, I think.
Hello, I'm Jackie Robbins. I'm the Wayward Cellist. And the first song, Once We Tune, that my friend and I will be playing, this is Catherine Warren, is by Anton Dvorak, and it's called Songs My Mother Taught Me, because I believe that Martha was a great mother to many people, not just her offspring, but to many young oboists who she just brought into their own creative element.
Certainly welcome to the Treasure Coast Unitarian Universalist congregation. We begin our services almost always with lighting the chalice. The chalice means light. We receive light from many places. We certainly receive light from music and from dedicated people. So we certainly are lifting up one dedicated lover of this congregation today, Martha Alfie. Our first hymn is Joyful, Joyful, the Beethoven tune, 29. Stand as able. Please be seated. As a kind of a spiritual backdrop or canopy, we often read these from the Christian and Jewish traditions, these readings from the back of our hymnal. The first is from Francis of Assisi. It's number 702 in the back. You can read it aloud with me or just hear me read it. Where hate rules, let us bring love. Where sorrow, joy. Let us strive more to comfort others than to be comforted, to understand others than to be understood, to love others more than to be loved. For it is in giving that we receive, and in pardoning that we are pardoned. And the 23rd Psalm is pretty familiar, and this is a version of it from the back of our hymnal, 642. You are my shepherd, I shall not want. You cradle me in green pastures. You lead me beside the still waters. You restore my soul. You guide me in paths of righteousness, for you are righteous. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff comfort me. You spread a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You soothe my head with oil, my cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in your house forever. From a congregation in Massachusetts. And now the family requested this, hymn 123. We sing it here every week as kind of our theme song. It's number 123. And I always say we'll remain seated, we'll hum it through once, we'll sing it once. It's very brief, but it lifts us. Spirit of Life, 123. Please be seated. As we put this service together, I kept hearing about tributes that would be coming in and musicians who might be visiting the play to show their love. So today we have guest oboists in the flesh and on YouTube. And now I think, Carrie, are you ready to play? Good, thank you. And you were a student.
I was a student, yeah, beginning when they moved to Stewart in 1989.
Good.
So the piece I'm playing today, Mrs. Elsie was a huge lover of nature, and this piece just reminds me of spring and birds and nature. It's Camille Saint-Saëns' sonata. Actually, they do the oboe.
They're sending out. Streaming, they call it, I think.
Now we're going to have a series of tributes of love. The way we usually do it is we invite family members to speak first, and then friends, and then I have some that have been emailed in that I'll read. Bruce, where's Bruce? You want to go first from here or from here? Do you want to pass? For the moment. Hold that thought then. Okay. What are other family members? Jenny, are you wanting to take to the mic? Okay. Anybody? All right. Any friends want to get up and say anything then?
My name is Pam Corbin, and I was a friend of Martha Alfie. And I was basically her coffee pusher. So I'm a retired flight attendant, and I used giving coffee to Martha a reason to get out of the hotel room in South America and in Europe to go, because I always had this mission, got to get coffee for Martha. And one of the things is I got coffee from Mexico. And Martha had a rating system for the coffee. And she told me, never bring that coffee from Mexico again. It definitely got a thumbs down. And one of the things was, I knew I shouldn't have brought it. It was on sale at the Mexican supermarket. I never should have brought that coffee. But the other things were that she had a coffee clutch at her house. So what I was doing was giving her coffee, and people the next day or the next week would come over and have coffee in the morning with her. She was my friend. Towards the end of her life, she didn't recognize me right away, and I would give reports about Martha. You needed to let her warm up her brain, 10, 15 minutes. And I tell this story to somebody else. She didn't recognize me right away while in the hospital bed. And then 10 or 15 minutes later, she would go, Pam, how is that ex-boyfriend that treated you so bad? I was like, how could she remember that? She was a lovely lady, and I want to give some shout-outs to the neighbors. There are some neighbors over here that she loved you dearly. There was a lady that came for coffee every morning. There she is. She loved these people. She loved you, Bruce. And she loved her family, and she was a good, good person. I was her friend, proud of it.
Okay, Pam, thank you. Yes, come on up to the mic.
You can lift that mic up.
Good afternoon. My name is Rob Rodman, and I was for 34 years, 1 month and 1 week, the band director at Martin County High School. I've been retired a while now, but I remember meeting Martha and Erling both, actually. I believe it was in 1990, shortly after they arrived here anyway. I don't remember the circumstances, but I remember talking with her and thinking, oh Lord, what did we do to get this treasure of a musician in Stuart, Florida? And I remember talking to a very, very talented young oboist that I had in the band about taking lessons with Martha, and she did. During the years, we had Martha come in many times to work with my students and just try to get them to understand a smidge of the vast amount of knowledge that was in her brain. I mean, if you know her background at Curtis, studying with Tabuteau, one of the only women that he ever took. I have heard the stories of Tabuteau, the way he would talk to her and all that stuff, and she would do the accents, and it was amazing. I think one of the greatest compliments I was ever paid by anyone was one of the days she was in listening to my band rehearsal, and watching me conduct. And she would often critique me, and I welcomed it. She was like the Nadia Boulanger of my life. And so, to make a long story short, I remember she says, "May I speak to the band?" And I said, "Well, yes, ma'am, of course." And she said, and I think this is the greatest compliment I've ever been paid, she said, "Do you realize how much musical information you are being given through that stick that's in his hand?" And I thought, geez, I wish they did. Because she saw it, she got it, she understood it, and her musicianship was just so extraordinary that I've had many people who, myself included, that thought they were great musicians that weren't when you got in her presence. You just realize that there's so much more. But it wasn't only music that I loved about Martha, and Erling too. I mean, he and I had talked so many times about playing golf together, and sadly we never did. He had a stroke and we just never were able to play. So Erling, when I get there, I hear there's some nice courses, and I'm sure my game will be a lot better than it is down here, so we'll play. But I can remember so many mornings going over to Martha's house, and she'd call me up and say, "Hey, why don't we get some coffee and donuts?" And so I'd go to Dunkin' Donuts and have coffee and take it over, and we'd sit there and just talk and talk and talk, and it was such a beautiful time to hear her stories, and she would listen to mine, and there's not many people like that I've known in my life it was just a joy to be around her. Whether we were talking music or talking one of her other favorite things, dogs. I wore this tie today in honor of Martha and Molly, who was her golden that she loved so much, and I met Molly a number of times, and so I had to wear a tie in her honor. And two quick stories. After she lost Molly, a friend of mine who was being forced into an assisted living facility had two dogs that she loved very much, and she gave me her border collie mix that I had for almost 5 years, and she had a black lab that didn't have a home, and he ended up at the Humane Society, and you worry about older black dogs that are in shelters, and so I sent Martha some video clips that I had taken of his name was Blackie, interestingly enough. And she goes, "He looks like a sweet dog." And I go, "Yeah, pretty much he is." And so she came up to look at Blackie and decided she wanted him. So I adopted him for Martha. And unfortunately, that adoption only lasted a short time. I think it was a week, because Blackie got snarky with a vet tech or something. And so Martha wasn't able to keep him. But I remember one very beautiful day going over there and sitting on the floor, and I was brushing Blackie because I'd known him for several years. And Martha just sitting in her chair, petting him and saying, "Oh, what a sweet doggy, what a sweet doggy." And that's a special memory that I will always carry with me. And then when she had her dog King, a little brown guy that's out there on the table, the picture of Martha, I took that picture. And so I was happy to see that. And when King, through some unfortunate circumstances, had to be given to the Humane Society, Martha gave me all his treasures, his balls, his toys, his food, his everything. And the lady that had adopted him, I managed to track her down, and I took her all of King's treasures, because that was very important to Martha. She loved him so much. And right before Christmas, I met up with this lady and dropped off King's treasures. And I asked her, I said, "Please," I gave her Martha's phone number and my phone number. I said, "She's really concerned about King, and she wants to know that he's doing well. Please let us know how he is from time to time, just a call." And she said, "Oh, okay, sure," and never heard from her. But Martha and I shared some great loves, obviously music, and our love of dogs was something very special. And I will always treasure the moments that God blessed me with to spend with my dear friend, Martha.
Thank you. Who else? Yes.
Grab one of these first. I don't know, my name is Linda, and Martha was my friend and mom to me. You said it over there, that Martha was a mom to many. I don't know if it was Goldens or gardening how I met Martha. I did notice your tie right away. I was doing some gardening for one of Martha's neighbors about 2 houses down and across the street when Martha came by walking 3 golden retrievers. And she came by again another time I was there, and she'd stop and we'd talk because I raised some Goldens up in Rhode Island. And then one day she said to me, "Would you come help me in my yard?" And I went to her yard and I went, "Oh my God." There was a lot to do there. This is fun. So I started gardening at Martha's. I'd never been in the house, and Erling used to come out and say to me, "You know, Linda, even trains stop." And I'd be sweating and pulling and just really into it. And one day Martha came to the door and she said to me, "I don't want to insult you, but would you ever help me in the house?" And I had never been in the house. And I said, "Sure." And I went in the house, and I thought there was a 4th golden retriever because there's so much dog hair. And she looks at me and she goes, "You know, I'd much rather play the piano." And there was this big grand piano in there, and she sat down and she started playing, and I went, "Holy shit." I thought I was at some wonderful concert. I mean, I had no idea. And I would see the kids come in for the oboe lessons, but I had no idea. And the art, and so I started in the house. And then we started with coffee. And then the coffee got better. But she supplied the coffee, and I would bring, if you've ever gotten the Fresh Market crumb cake, she just, "Did you bring the crumb cake? Did you bring the crumb cake?" And you know, they're about this thick, and there's 4 in the box, and you can turn them into 8. You can't eat one of pieces. And I did coffee with Martha every morning, and spent a lot of time there. And then I helped Erling on his journey, helping him. Martha couldn't bathe him anymore. He couldn't shower, and I said, "I'll help you." And I did a little home health, mostly as a companion. I'm not the farthest thing from a nurse you'll ever meet. And I just loved her dearly. I had a lot of issues in my life with my kids, and at the time I had some issues with alcohol, and Martha and Erling would take me in and talk to me. And she was just a wonderful person in my life, and I've missed her. And one day we were talking about, she had a bucket list, and she wanted to go horseback riding and ice skating at Rockefeller Center. And I said, "Well, I think you have a better chance at horseback riding." So her 90th birthday was coming up, and I had a friend who did equine therapy. I asked her if she could take Martha horseback riding, and she said, "I can't do that. It's an insurance issue." And she goes, "But I know someone who can." And Bruce and I got her out there to Palm City, and she went horseback riding. And what a beautiful day it was. We had a lot of fun that day. And I just love her dearly. She taught me a lot of things about art and music and life, and how to handle things, and how to calm down, and just do the next thing in front of you. And I'll miss her, and I'm just blessed to have had her in my life, and so happy to be here today. Thank you.
Yes, Carrie.
All right, as you know, I was one of her music students for many,
Closer to the
was one
mic,
of her
yeah.
Hello. I was one of her music students for many, many years. And her music knowledge and the stories from her years of studying with Angelucci and Tabuteau at Curtis always astounded me. She truly was a trailblazer who helped pave the way for female musicians. I idolized her playing and her expertise, but I also thought she had the most romantic marriage. Because, to my young mind, there was nothing sexier than a string bass. As I was thinking over Mrs. Alfie's musical advice, I realized how much of it holds true not just for music, but for how we live our lives. Excuse me. Okay. So, some of the advice Mrs. Alfie gave over the years includes, before you can play beautiful music, you have to breathe. And on oboe, we must inhale and exhale. I realize that in life it's important to pause and reflect, inhale and exhale. Music is all about the wind line. Keep the music moving forward in life. Like the wind line, there's only one direction. Groupings are important in music. These groupings create phrase and help direct the melody. The groups of people we surround ourselves with influence the direction of our life song. And then don't force the high notes. Let them come naturally. In life, we can't force any of our relationships. The beginnings and ends of notes are important, as are all the notes in between. Even long notes are interesting. Just don't sit on them. Do something. Make them beautiful. Read the music, study the music, but add your own interpretation. Mrs. Alfie was an artist not only musically, but on canvas. She had the ability to paint colors with a paintbrush, but then also with her oboe. She would often ask at lessons, can you hear the color in that note? Make it sound more orange or red or purple. I think all of us led a more colorful life just knowing and being in her presence.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Oh, yeah, okay, just in case. I'm Judith Watt. I'm going to start the story a little differently. I'm going to start it with the history of this church. I was employed by Gretchen Hammerstein as a librarian with the Martin County Library System. And one day she said to me, you know, you're a Unitarian, aren't you? And I said, well, yes, for years. She said, well, I'm trying to get a group together, and we want to build a fellowship here and hopefully a church. And I'm inviting a few people to the library at that point to meet. Well, the Alfies were there, the Shueys were there. I think Doreen Ross was there, and maybe Jerry Shaw, who I see someplace. Yes, he was there, that I remember, and a couple of other people. The Alfies were very, very generous. They were all for it. They had bought a house not far away, very close. And they said, well, we will have fundraisers at our house. And everybody will, you know, we all brought some delicious dish to eat. And then we would make a donation as well. So this went on for some time. And all of a sudden, walking into that house with all the artwork, all the music, all the memories in that big, large room with her antiques and her piano, and all of a sudden, you know, people would start to play piano and music. And I said, my goodness, you're talented. I didn't know anything. And she said, well, I've been a musician most of my life. She said, I went to the Curtis Institute of Music in Philadelphia, and I was dumbstruck because I had been going to free recitals there for years. And she said, she knew people like Efren Zimbalist, and Bernstein was a student when she started to go there, and during the war years. And she knew, and Bob told something this morning about how prejudiced the orchestra world was on female musicians. But in her lifetime, she did play with Leonard Bernstein at Tanglewood, and her very great story was when she was newly married, had bought a house in Buffalo, New York, and she gets a phone call from Leopold Stokowski, who was one of the great world conductors. He used to be conductor at the Philadelphia Orchestra before Normandy. And he said, Martha, I would really like you to come to Honolulu and be part of my newly formed orchestra. I think he was looking for an English horn, which is very similar to an oboe. Oh, she said, I can't possibly. I'm newly married. I have a house, children. I don't know at that point. And she said later, you know, I wonder if I really made the right decision. She was the delight. We would go to, when she found out I liked music, we would go to the Lyric. Tricia might talk a bit about that. And of course, she would be very, very critical when she would sit up there in the lyric, listening to whoever was playing or whatever orchestra was there. But she was wonderful. She seriously knew music, and I loved her dearly. I loved her garden. I remember Molly. We would visit her quite often, and that's probably one of the ways I got to know David, actually. Because one day David said to me, do you know Martha Alfie? And I said, yes, I know. He said, well, I'm going over to visit her this afternoon. How would you like to come with me? I said, yes, so sure, I'll come with you, instead of, visiting her by myself. So we had a wonderful afternoon. And yeah, very, very, very talented woman. Very generous, too, very generous. Loved her.
Anybody else?
Hi, I'm Tia Breeding, the aforementioned Tricia in my sister's story. So I was a Johnny-come-lately. Okay. I was a Johnny-come-lately with Martha. I would come down to Stewart to visit Judith, and Martha and Erling would have us over for Thanksgiving dinner or some other big dinner in their big, beautiful house with all of the art and all of the music and stuff piled everywhere. When I think of her, I think of generosity of spirit, generosity of person, generosity of mind, so there was so much generosity, it just overflowed everywhere. So then I came down and was a member here, and we would go and see her, and I remember that it was very difficult for other musicians who went up to her standards. We had a pianist here for a while that Martha did not like because he did not play the music correctly. And if you sat next to her in church, she would tell you all about it. Just like if you sat next to her at the Lyric, she would tell you all about this musician, and this was flat, and that should have been different, and that phrasing wasn't done well. But her garden was this wild, fabulous creation, and I know you made great inroads, but it was still a wild, fabulous creation. So she was just one of the most generous women I've ever met in every way. Intellectually, physically, spiritually, emotionally, honestly. She would honestly tell you what she thought, and it was a privilege for me to be a part of her life and have her as a part of mine.
Thank you.
This is interesting, that old saying, there are no accidents. I happened here to church for the first time last Sunday, and then in this morning service found about the service for Martha, and I was a student of Martha's, she helped me transcend from opera to pop music and helped train me eventually to doing Barbra Streisand reviews for the Center for Aging, which became the Kane Center. She was the gentlest, most loving, very strict about how you did things, woman, but I adored her, and her demeanor was strict but had its softness, and she was always after me. Stand up straight. Breathe. No, you've got to breathe. And it was marvelous. I only studied with her for less than a year, and then life got in the way. But she was one of the kindest, most wonderful people in my life. And thank you, Bruce, for introducing me to her parents. I knew Erling as well. And wow, and I remember Molly. So thank you.
Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Jackie Robbins, and I moved here just over 10 years ago, and I was asked to come and play several times, and I said, you church, sure, I'll play for half price. And I met Martha here because she happened to come to church with her good friend, I'm sorry, Gail McCarthy. And the two of them were sitting over there, and after the service, I got called over, and I got introduced to Martha, and there was just a special vibe. So from that point on, whenever Gail could get over there to bring her to church, because she was well into her 80s, like 88 when I met her, or 89, and they'd come, and Martha would just say, inspiration, expiration, and your phrasing is so beautiful, and that's what it's all about. And so for the last several years, I've been visiting her in the rehab center and just playing solo Bach for her. And she'd close her eyes, and she'd go wherever, and she'd come out of it, and she'd say, you know, my teacher, keep it to, it's all about phrasing, and your phrasing is so beautiful, so please come back whenever you can, which I did until I showed up one day, and there were no cars. They had closed the rehab place down, and that was fairly recently, and I just enjoyed bringing Gail over there, and then when Gail got ill, she was there as well, and I would bring Martha up to Gail's room, and we'd have little reunions, and all I do is play Bach for her, and she would never use any word except phrasing, and it was quite a beautiful experience for me, and so I thank you all for remembering her spirit. And so I would like now, after everybody's done, I'd like to play Gabrielle's Oboe, which is a piece from a movie written by a great composer. Is it Marconi? Yes, quite a beautiful piece, and I just think of her and her phrasing in life and inspiration. Yes, and then other people, unless there's someone else who'd like to talk.
Linda,
Yes.
I have some tributes to read also.
Oh, okay.
I'm Linda Shuey, and I knew Martha as a Unitarian. I didn't really know this other side of her. Years ago, we met them 30 years ago, 30 plus, and they were always a pair. I didn't even think of Martha as a separate person. We always saw them together. When we first met them, we were trying to organize a church, and we had a meeting down at our place in Rocky Point, and they showed up. And we were just talking, and I said, yeah, my grandfather was Norwegian, and they invited us to the Sons of Norway, just like that. I don't think it's even around anymore. And so we knew them as a couple, as a pair, and especially as a Unitarian. She was so strong for the church. And when people talk about her generosity, I didn't know her that well. We spent time up in North Carolina, and then my granddaughter was very, very sick, had a brain tumor, and when I would be with with Martha, we wouldn't talk about it. It was wonderful. Other people talked about it, and she was such a happy person to be with. And also, when people were talking about, I would go over to visit her, and she'd say, would you bring some cupcakes or cake along? And so she was just really a joyful person to be around. When they were in Iceland, she brought me a gift. I didn't know her that well. She brought me the most wonderful gift, a beautiful ceramic plate with some volcanic ash on it. And so I really appreciated the Unitarian side of her and them as a couple. Thank you.
Are there others before I read from those who sent tributes? Do you want to speak?
If you ask my mom about,
Those are my,
if you ask my mom about her opinion on playing, artwork, anything, be prepared. She's gonna tell you like she, that this is it, this is how it is. Also, sometimes it's hard to get your kids to come visit you when you get older. She knew I liked coffee, I like coffee, she likes coffee and tea, and I get a phone call. Hey, Bruce, got some coffee from Mexico, wherever. And there's some cheesecake or whatever, you know. Why don't you come on over? Okay, so go over and visit. I remember both my parents saying you can be whatever you want to be in life, but whatever you do, be the best. I don't care if you're a garbage collector or a professor, love what you do, be the best. And as far as loving animals, yep, I grew up with that. And the most important thing, I think, or one of the most, was that they said from a young age, I don't care what you really believe, as long as you don't believe in a devil or something like that, find something that you can use as a compass to lead your life, live your life by. Don't care if it's Unitarian, Unity, Jewish, it doesn't matter. But find something that's a divine light in your life, and always do for the good. And it was great to have my mom and dad. They were just always behind me. They came down here, by the way. I had a machine shop. And Bill had been with me for 15 years. Now I work for him in the afternoons. And even through the machine work, it'd be like, you know, he'd say, well, why does it take so long? It's got to be the best. It's not good enough. It's not close enough. It's got to be the best. And that was from both my mom and dad. Some of the first services were held here in my mom and dad's home in the living room. I know that because I used to set up the VCR when a VCR was a thing. And I remember Dad saying, well, let's, you know, there's enough people. It grew from 5 people to 10 to 20 to 30 to 40. And I don't know if the services were held in the library after that or not, but I remember my dad met Gene Heston, and they said, you know, let's find some land. So they found the land here. I think Gene Heston was a major
His pictures in the
Yeah.
hallway.
player, and I know that he matched what other people would donate. My mother would talk to people in the community, urge them to come, check it out. It's different. You know, maybe you like it. My dad drew the original drawings of the church, the first part, in the great room of our home, of my mom's home. My dad was the old-time draftsman, so he drew up the renderings, and they had an architect look up, sign off on it, and all that. So that was the very beginnings, and I don't know what all else. It was always positive, always encouraging. Be the best, do the best, and love.
Anyone else? I've got some readings from people that couldn't be here. Dr. Eric Olson, professor of oboe at Florida State University, Tallahassee. I am truly grateful for having the opportunity to become acquainted with Martha over the years. She was a one-of-a-kind person and a trailblazer without a doubt in the oboe world. She provided a connection for us back to the days of Mr. Tabato, his legendary personality and musicianship, of which she so vividly spoke. Martha touched the lives of many people and was especially beloved to her students, several of whom I've had the opportunity to teach myself. Without the presence of Martha Alfie in this world, our lives and our world of music would surely feel less meaningful. Now the memories of her musical path and passion will live on through us. And this is from another, Dr. Sotos Giovannis. Let me mention, if you simply Google Martha Alfie, you get a whole lot of stories and bios of people she knew and touched, and her storied orchestral career. So if you want to go further into it, I enjoyed reading about it, and I'll mention one little thing later. This is from Dr. Sotos. I'm so sad about Mrs. Alfie's death, but also happy for such a long life of 97 years. She did wonderful things in classical music and played under stars like Dmitri Mitropoulos and Leonard Bernstein. when she was in the thick of her career. She really was a pioneer, the first and the last in a way. One of the first women to be a solo instrumentalist, and one of the very last taboo-toe students. I learned so much from her, and I'm so lucky to have been her student and to have spent so much time with her, learning not just how to play, but also all about the orchestral world. She pushed me to play in a more bold and original way, which wasn't my natural way of playing when I came to her. I remember driving all the way down from Tallahassee in the late 90s to work with her and prep for my conservatory auditions. Eventually, I got into John Mack's oboe class in Cleveland with her coaching. I would not have had a professional career at all in music if it was not for Martha. Then also from a Dr. Laura Gilio Grays. I've always loved Mrs. Alfie. My favorite memories were how she sang the notes as do, re, mi, instead of saying the actual notes. How she also encouraged me to bridge notes together, not pause for a breath. How she always encouraged the musicality of the piece, and how she had me get up before the band one time to conduct when she was subbing for Mr. Rodman. A legend, as kind in her heart as she was talented in music. And one more from Bridget Morey. Too many memories to write, her voice, her stories, her passion, learning whistle tone harmonics that she learned from William Kincaid. And she gave me her copy of Kincaidиana, forcing me to sight transpose vertically and horizontally. Solfeggio, I'm sure some of you know what that is. Solfeggio, when practicing technical passages in chunks, to always start with the final note of the preceding phrase, to always connect phrases even during tech work. Phrasing, phrasing, phrasing. She helped so many of us become not only better musicians, but better teachers. All right, I'm just going to say a few things about my history with Martha as I became the minister here in '09. One of the first homes I got to was their place, and it was a treat. I got there many times. I learned to hope that the dogs were going to be in the next room with the door shut. They often were, but they weren't always. She was always, Erling was usually there. He was pretty quiet. Martha was always dignified, professional, and interesting. She talked about the UU churches she'd been a part of. One of the first things she told me was that she was active in the Buffalo UU, a big church. And she said, we had a lot of professors, and they all took turns doing the sermon. You didn't have to hire a minister. Here I was. Oh, that's interesting, Martha. Thank you for sharing. I heard that a couple of times. We had a couple professors, but I didn't hear that they wanted to do all the work. So anyhow, Martha talked about her wonderful orchestral background. I mean, it was hard to believe that we had this person in this little congregation here in Stewart, and then of course I learned that she was in at the beginning. We have two little publications the church has put together before my time. One is called A Brief History by Ken George, and Martha and Erling are on page 1. They were part of the church's beginnings. And then there's a book of poetry called Connections, Poems by TCUUC Poets, artwork by Martha Alfie. So there was that side to her that we got in the book Connections. anyhow, just knowing her was a delight, and hearing her background and what lives on through her artistry. The last time I saw her at the Stewart Nursing Home and Rehab Place, she was memory challenged for some time, but I said to her, Martha, I'll always treasure the memory you told to a reporter. There were a number of interviews that people did with her, and in one of them, she talked about the great conductor. I think it was Stokowski, I'm not sure, but she said after the presentation, the music, Stokowski went up to her and kissed her on the cheek. And she said she didn't wash her face for a month. It was a treasured memory. I'm not sure it was Stokowski, but I think it was. And 2 months ago, she remembered that and told me. She really was a treasure here, as they both were. And they were a part of our beginning, and they'll certainly be a part of the tradition that we keep going here. We'll always, always be grateful for her. Now, I want to close with a YouTube piece, if I can get it. This is a presentation by Abigail Bracken. Do you know Abigail, Abby?
Yeah, sure.
She was a student of Martha.
Yeah, she started out with me and I pushed her onto Martha.
Do you know this person too?
Yes.
You all know her. I didn't know her.
She and her sister were in the youth symphony, and I mentored her. Very talented.
Okay. Bear with me, and this is 2 minutes. She's going to speak just briefly, and then I hope we're going to hear everything.
I had the distinct privilege of studying with Mrs. Alfie while I was in high school. I was incredibly fortunate that I lived in the same community as someone with her expertise and skill. Many oboists would have traveled hundreds of miles to study with the likes of Mrs. Alfie, and many did. As a teacher, Mrs. Alfie was kind but firm. She never let me get away with doing anything but my best, and she would not move on from a topic until she was certain that I understood it fully. Her commitment to developing my fundamentals continues to serve me well today. I appreciated that she was honest with me about what it takes to be a professional musician. She told me many sobering stories about her struggles in early auditions, once telling me a conductor told his committee, "I will hire the man that plays next best to her rather than hire a woman." And yet she persevered. I admire her as a pioneer in this field, and I can only hope to do her justice in my own career. One of my favorite memories with Mrs. Alfie is picking out my English horn with her. It was my first time choosing between two instruments, and I knew I wanted her valuable input. After an hour's deliberation, we decided on a 1922 Lorraine, a model just a few years older than Mrs. Alfie herself. My English horn remains special to me, all the more so because the last music I ever played for her was on this instrument. When I visited her the month before she passed, I played the English horn solo from Act 2 of Massenet's opera, Cendrillon. It brought a smile to her face to hear me play. To honor this cherished memory and her love of the English horn, I have recorded it again, and I will always keep her oft-quoted advice close to my heart. You must play one beautiful note.
This is just a minute, but try to hear it. Going to be a postlude, right? After the postlude, let's all go to the next room. look at the pictures, share more stories, and just remember all that we've been given. You want to speak first? Or who said that?
Tia. So she said, and eat.
Oh,
One more thing. Martha loved chocolate. You showed up with chocolate, that smile went from this big to this big.
The other thing is she loved blueberries. When she was a canoe instructor as a young woman, one of the last things that I brought to her, and in her honor, brought a whole big bunch of blueberries.
Oh, good, great. Hot ticket it though.
they're notoriously good things to stay healthy. Are we ready now for the postlude?
Yes.
Let's have it.
Gabriel's over.
find our way to the other building to continue the rememberings.
Oh, yeah, yeah.